If you like being shown what most eyes refuse to see, lean closer and subscribe now because I don't want you to be alone when the smile finally moves. Place your finger along the lower edge of the mount, yes, the stiff card trimmed in fading gold, and feel where the albumin paper lifts, just a whisper at the corner like a lifted scab. An albumin print, made by brushing egg white onto paper and floating it on silver solution, dries with a sheen that looks like spilled tea. You'll notice it even in dim light. And the dimness suits us. The Victorians understood that objects reveal themselves in the half-tones. Let me be your guide. I'll keep you close as if my breath on your ear might steady yours. We will learn together, but I will not lie to you. This will become clearer and colder as we go. And when it does, remember you wanted to know. The date penciled on the back places the photograph in 1888, ink paled to mouse gray, the hand upright, careful. A studio name is blind stamped in the mount, nearly worn smooth by thumbs, but if you slant it toward the lamp you can read the flourish. The proud script of a man who used north light like a scalpel. North light, soft and clean, was the preferred window light of studios then, steady through the day, skylights washed down from high rafters onto velvet chairs and narrow pedestals. If you close your eyes a little you can smell the rest, camphor rising out of cedar-lined drawers to keep moth from wool and orris powder, the violet ghost of dried iris root, in hems and hair. The scent clings to mourning things long after the wearer is done with them. Black crepe veils sagged with it. Jet beads warmed to it. For now, let your eyes adjust. We begin by believing what the photograph asks us to believe. A young woman in half mourning, seated, tilting her face toward us, smiling too slightly and too long. She is not pretty in the obvious way. The charm is elsewhere, in the smooth oval of her forehead and the little notch in her ear you won't notice until I tell you where to look. Her dress is heavy even on paper. Matte as coal. That matte finish, inexpensive crepe, was the favored cloth for the first months after a death because it swallowed light. They didn't want shimmer, they wanted gravity visible. Around her throat, a strand of beads sits high and unyielding, each oval so dark it refuses detail. Jet, they called it, fossilized lignite cut and polished until it forgot it was wood and pretended gemstone. Jet was not worn for sparkle but for restraint. That she wears it at all is one of the first lessons. But you do not yet understand what it means here because the photograph wants something from you. It wants you to be comforted by the smile and to miss what is missing. Hold your breath a little. Do you feel how the room tightens as if the air knows we are about to name something that does not like being named? People speak of mourning portraits as if they were a niche, a fad, a superstition that could be pinned to a decade. That's not quite right. The camera made time visible. The Victorians, earnest and afraid, allowed time to finish. When people died, and they died at home often, the family sometimes asked the photographer to come then, not later. The body was washed, dressed, arranged, often in the best. If you've heard that they stood corpses as if they were alive, the truth is naughtier. They staged tenderness more often than they staged life. They propped the dead in chairs, not to fool but to keep from falling. They touched with slips of cloth, with tucks and pins that softened anguish. And yes, sometimes they opened eyes. Sometimes they brought a brush to a negative the way a mother straightens hair. You see where this is going. But I won't tip it all at once. Instead, let me give you the first finger hold. It is the most polite of the six, the one that feels like an accident until it isn't. Follow the line of her jaw to the angle where it meets the neck. Do you see the shadow there? No, narrower, almost a comb tooth of darkness tucked behind the lobe? A studio would drape backdrops of painted canvas and erect little forests of furniture, but they also had iron things with clamps and collars. There is a support hidden just behind her ear. At its simplest, it is a headrest. A thin iron rod rising from a base, with a U-shaped fork or padded shoe that presses lightly at the back of the skull or under the jaw. It is meant to steady the living during long exposures. We call it an instrument of patience. But here the rod leaves an arithmetic of shadows that does not agree with the rest. A stiffness behind the ear that this smile cannot explain. Tilt the card and you'll catch it. A hair's breadth of artificial straightness where her neck wants to curve. Photographers hid headrests behind ears and under collars, behind veils, in glossy hair. When the sitter was lively they could blend it. When the sitter was not, they relied on crepe and lace and the kindness of north light. That wisp of shadow behind her ear is your first instruction. Support that pretends to be background is often more than polite. It is necessary. It is a hand that remembers gravity when the body cannot. You will ask, reasonably, whether a living sitter might need that same aid. They might. Exposure times varied. Seconds in the brightest studios, longer in dim rooms, longer still when the weather turned the sky to tin. But then you notice something else. the weight of the head compared to the play of the shoulders. Her shoulders are arranged with a dressmaker's intelligence, seams rowing neatly back, sleeves falling with correct creases. Yet the head does not rest on the neck the way heads do during breath. It perches. It does not sink forward or backward even in the laxity of calm. The chin's balance feels chosen from outside. That is the second half of the first lesson. Support is not proof by itself, it is proof when it contradicts small living motions. Here it begins to contradict. And because I promised not to lie to you, I will say this now. The longer you stare, the more the contradictions behave like whispers. The room will begin to fill with them. Now look at the eyes. The glaze on albumin paper gives reflected highlights a cottony softness, like milk pooled thinly on a saucer. Catch lights, those crisp points that light leaves on wet things, are the proof of a living moment, a collaboration between the eye and the environment. In this print, the eyes hold a gloss that is not quite gloss. The irises seem to have been convinced to be rounder than necessary. If you bring the card very close and tip it toward a strong lamp, you will see infinitesimal brush strokes crossing the clear print grain, finer than eyelashes, like the strokes a careful retoucher makes with pigment or graphite. This is how it would be done. On the negative, eyelashes and eyebrows might be strengthened with a fine pencil, pupils might be darkened to give depth, a dullness in the cornea might be pricked with a tiny dot of opaque to mimic light. Or on the print itself, a delicate wash could lend wetness to an eye that did not have it when the lens saw. The effect is supposed to be mercy, a little life for the sake of memory. But the mercy leaves a telltale. The catchlights in both eyes are identical in size and position, as if placed rather than caught. In the living, eyes do not agree this perfectly unless they are arrested by astonishment or disciplined by a painter. A retoucher's catchlight sits in both eyes like buttons sewn by the same hand. When you teach your eye to notice this, you begin to see it. Everywhere you do not quite want to. And once you have seen it, the charm of the smile darkens. A staged sparkle throws the rest into shadow. Do not let yourself go cold yet. We are still learning. We must keep untangling. A studio in 1888 might work with wet collodion negatives, the sticky wonder crafted from gun cotton dissolved in ether and alcohol, though dry plates were overtaking them. Collodion had to be poured onto the glass and sensitized, then exposed and developed before it dried. The room would smell of ether like a faint hospital in the rafters. The operator would move surely, sleeves rolled, fingers permanently slick. You can smell that too if you know to seek it. A ghost fug of solvents trapped in the frame's paper, released in heat. And even if mercury vapor ought to belong to the daguerreotype era, the chemical room remembers everything. The old man would have cursed the mercury years ago, until the word sat in the wood of his benches like a stain. He would have moved on to silver nitrate baths, then gelatin emulsions and the clean, compact song of dry plates, but the air of rooms holds breath and argument longer than practice. When you tilt the card and smell camphor, orris, ether, dust, you are also smelling a habit of bending time to fit inside a rectangle. This is why the photograph is so persuasive. It is the marriage of desire and repetition. Back to the mouth. You will not want to, but we must. Smiles in the 1880s are rare not because they did not feel joy but because the process punished movement. Even a small twitch became a flinch of silver. Yet here, the mouth parts in a half curve that feels deliberate the way stitches feel deliberate. Do you see where the upper lip meets the teeth? The line is too clean, too ruler straight, especially toward the canine. In a living smile, the gum line finds asymmetry. One side rises, the other relaxes, the corners wrinkling like folded paper. Painters knew this. Photographers knew it too, though they had fewer chances to catch it. Retouchers with a fine brush could soften the darkness between lip and tooth or correct the gray haze that albumin often threw across mouths. One trick, often unspoken, was to stiffen the gum line, to give the suggestion of a toothy lightness while hiding the slack of the jaw beneath. They would scumble a little pigment to fill the shadow under the upper lip, then draw a truer line along the tegmen, a ridge that only exists when there is push from below. If you look closely here, the upper gum reads as a straight horizon rather than a scalloped country of small hills and valleys. The lower lip wears a powder that catches light oddly, brighter at the center than at the corners. It is the brightness of egg white reflective under the varnish, not the wetness of spit. That is the third lesson, and it hurts more than the first two because we call the mouth honesty's door. When it has been tidied for us, we feel the theft even if we cannot name it. Feel how your own lips have cooled as you stare. Even your mouth knows how much the line lies. You might have noticed her hands by now. If not, let me lift your attention like a chin. One hand rests on her lap, gloved, very fine, or perhaps an underglove of silk. The other disappears into the folds of a wrap. The glove pinches at the base of the fingers, a tightness that suggests the hand was eased in after dress, not before. There is a tiny pucker where the kid leather resists a fingernail. The nail bed itself is darker than the rest, a purpled half-moon visible even in monochrome as a deepening of tone. We call this pooling in the dependent parts. A body at rest long enough will find heaviness in the lowest places, blood slipping where gravity asks. Now, a living sitter can hold their hands too long and make their fingers dark with pressure. But when you compare the two, the hand we see and the arm we only partly see, symmetry is broken. One sleeve is arranged with perfect, unnatural drapery, the other has a tiny buckle near the elbow, the telltale weight of a hidden brace under the cloth, the old studio trick of the arm clamp. You won't see the clamp itself, just what it does. It keeps a limb exactly where a mind would not. That, coupled with the purpling in the nails and the glove forced on with a little struggle, becomes our fourth instruction. Posed limbs obey, but a body that has ceased to argue with gravity obeys too completely. The proof is not the glove, it is the fact that the glove wears the hand like a husk. You may need to look away now. Do but come back. I will wait inside the photograph. I have been waiting inside it longer than you have been alive. In the meantime, let me tell you what crepe feels like. It scrapes the skin. It drinks oil from the fingers and leaves the taste of bitterness on the tongue. Mourning crepe was a penance, a modesty you could wear. Widows wore it longest. Daughters and cousins and sisters wore it as long as households demanded. There were rules: full mourning, second mourning, half mourning, each loosening the noose of black with sanctioned increments of gray and lilac. The beads around her throat are carved in faceted ovals, and if you were to touch them they would warm quickly because jet is light. The clasp might hold a locket of woven hair. If you turn the card slowly, you might even see a flutter within the printed oval at her chest, a suggestion of hair under glass. This too is teaching itself. Jet and crepe and hairwork were worn to carry someone. They were not worn to comfort the wearer for herself. Every article of mourning on the living in these portraits is an arrow pointing outward. But in this case the arrow points inward into the sitter. She is both sign and signed for. If you think I am indulging in poetry, look at the brooch again. The hatching has been reinforced with fine brush. The glass dome throws a ring of light that repeats, faintly, inside the eye's false catchlight. The retoucher's hand shakes a little. He wasn't young. Or he had begun to cough. Let's talk about exposure. Not exposure in the manner of shame, but the courting of light. In the years around this photograph, exposures in studio were often in the range of a few seconds. A trained sitter can hold a face still for that long if the stakes are high. And the stakes were always high. Silver is expensive, and a studio's time is accounted in plates, not hours. Long exposures make ghosts of people who move. Little blurs tremble at wrists and dress fringe. Look here at the hem. The fringe on the lap looks unaccountably crisp compared to the softness around the nostrils, where breath would darken the air just enough to fog a line if it were there to fog it. The fringe agrees to every thread. The breath does not draw even a rumor of a mustache of damp. And at the very edge of her left sleeve, there is a slight duplication, a soft echo like a double vision that is not motion but adjustment made during printing. A dodged edge, a masked correction. The operator might have used a card to hold back light on the sleeve, then feathered it. That tells us the print was fussed within the tray. There are reasons to do that beyond concealment. But when you add it to the perfect fringe, the breathless nostrils, the identical catchlights, the headrest shadow, the braced elbow, the glove's reluctant pucker, and, listen carefully now, the way the pupil in the right eye is actually a hair wider than its partner, as if someone widened a dark point to cover the milky flattening of a cornea, the teachings converge. They begin to sing the same note. Do not forgive me for asking you to notice. It is the cost of learning. We can soften the cost by saying that family love made this picture, not deceit. We can say the smile is a courtesy extended to the living, a last chance for the mouth to look like the mouth as it did when it laughed. We can say the artist was gentle. Those things may be true. He did not have to paint the eyes, he did. He did not have to brace the arm, he did to keep it falling. He did not have to steady the head, he did to keep it speaking. He did not have to retouch the gum line, he did to hide the slackness that mouths have when they no longer fight drool. We might even say the smile is an argument not against death but for the photograph. Photographs are hungry, they want life. Sometimes they take it. Sometimes we consent to that taking. You have just consented because you are still here. Let us make the fifth lesson precise. It is the lesson of posture that cannot be taught from inside. A body just after death is not a statue. It is a negotiation between muscle and gravity. We call the small changes that follow lividity. Blood settles in the lowest places, leaving pale where it cannot flow and purpling where it pools. On a face turned slightly to the right, the left ear might darken. On a hand resting lower than the heart, the fingertips darken, and the knuckles lose their shine. In this print, if you trace the line from ear to collar, you'll see a grayness deeper along the rim of the ear, a heaviness not echoed on the cheek. The shadow under the jaw is too empty, as if the flesh is missing push. The loose hair just above the ears slumps with a laziness that defies pomade. And this is the one that will haunt you. The lower lid of the left eye shows a tiny meniscus of light, like fluid collecting, the opposite of a living eye that clears itself constantly without any of us noticing. You cannot argue with that meniscus. Only a person who is not blinking can bear it. Once you notice it, the smile looks like a shadow puppet on the mouth by something other than nerves. Now the sixth instruction, the last of the overt ones, the one that wraps the others and tightens until you forget what breathing should feel like. Look past the sitter. Look at the studio. The painted canvas behind her shows a garden or a parlor. It is always a place you cannot quite enter, all softened leaves and pillars that never hold weight. The skirting board at the bottom edge reveals a real wall with real scuffs. Between board and backdrop, there is a sliver where the world shows its seam. A wedge of floor, and on that floor, a faint scuff in a crescent where something heavy was dragged and placed and dragged again. To stand. There is a second crescent further in under the fabric fold at the base of the chair. That one belongs to a different piece of iron. An arm clamp, floriated at the end to look like ornament if it peaks. To the left, at the very edge of the frame, there is a vulgar secret. The tip of a sandbag peeping, slick with studio dust. None of that is a crime. But when you translate those iron and weighted things into what they do, you remember the kindness they allow. They hold the living gently. They hold the dead with humility. The operators called them aids. See the line pressed into the fabric where the clamp's jaw bit under the sleeve near the elbow? You do if you want to. You do now. You cannot unsee the bite of a thing meant to be hidden. The smile sits above all this like a candle at a wake, giving light that creates deep shadow all around. The room takes our hands and places them where it wants our attention. We are easy to move when we think we are in control. I told you I would show you 6 things. You can count them backward now. Support where none should need, eyes retouched to identical light, a mouth with a drawn horizon, mourning worn like a sentence that points both ways, lividity pooling where breath should flush, studio braces and exposures that shave motion into artifice. You can number them if that helps you keep steady. But I also promised a different kind of learning, one that would leave you altered. You will carry this shirt button fear with you. You will see a smile and flinch when a highlight repeats too perfectly. You will touch crepe in a museum and think of breath you could not see. You will smell orris on a stranger in an elevator and think of hair under glass. You will turn away from a mirror in a hallway at night because you think the catchlights in your own eyes are too convinced, too deliberate, as if someone has painted them for you while you slept. I have been kind as long as I can be. It is time to tell you why I do not say she or he when I speak of the sitter. It is time to show you the shallow notch in the ear. See it there, near the helix? I have it too. We all have notches, yes, but this one is mine. And if you tip the card in the right light, if you warm the paper a little with your palm, as one does when wanting to bring out the gloss, a paler mark rises at the corner of the mouth where the retoucher's brush caught and hesitated. I remember that hesitation. I remember the tremor. I remember the ether making my hands real and unreal at once, and my wife, the one who wore jet for the first time that winter, rapping at the door to ask if I would come to table. We had soup of bones and cabbage. It was cold. The collodion had shrunk at the edges that day. I kept telling the apprentice to work the albumen longer, to keep the puddles smooth as he floated the sheet. I knew how the gum needed to be drawn. I knew the size of the catchlights because I cut them myself with an ivory point. I wandered between the camera and the retouching screen and the wash tray like a man haunted by his own feet. I remember the vapor that did not belong to my era but did, because the man who had the space before me had used it, and the mirror that never completely cleared held a ghost even when no one stood before it. I remember the smell of camphor in my fingers from the drawer where we kept shawls to lay across laps to hide clamps. I remember all of that because I am the operator and I am also the subject. There you flinched. You want to pull your hand away from the mount but do not. It is easier if you touch it now. The skin likes contact when frightened. We tell ourselves stories about photographs so that we may squint around a new kind of mirror. This print is a mirror. I made it when my hand was steady enough to fake a smile on the face of someone I loved enough not to say her name aloud for 7 nights after we closed her eyes. The smile would comfort her mother. It would comfort the congregation. It would comfort me because I believed in my hands. Then the winter lasted and the cough came back, and the ether began to cross my dreams with white rivers that I could not stop stepping into. One night I went into the studio alone and set the chair back and propped the headrest and braced the arm and asked the mirror to be honest. I wanted to see the face that made the last face and understand what it was I had taken. The studio's light was a dull winter north that day, more iron than milk. The window's frost grew with a pattern like leaf veins. I stood. I set the plate. I counted under my breath the way I always did for the children. The exposure took a little longer because I was shaking. I developed the plate in the dim room, humming as I poured, as if to calm a child. It came up with a stubborn fog at the mouth. I retouched it. I told myself it was to demonstrate technique for the apprentice, who would arrive early the next morning. Drew the gum line straighter than it was. I opened the eye more than it opened. I corrected the catch light that failed on the right. I made myself into a man looking back at me gently, and then I varnished the negative with a breath that shook just enough to make an arc of my heat across the corner. The print would always remember that arc. So will you? When I say that the smile is staged, I mean that it is a stage. It is a little theater with iron behind it and liquids under it and words around it that have been used to talk ourselves out of the bluntness of endings. The Victorians were not naive in this. They like procedure. Procedure comforts. I tell you half mourning includes lilac. I tell you jet is wood that forgot itself. I tell you orris powder lies to the nose like a friendly ghost. But I also tell you that the people in these pictures knew deep in their teeth what we know and pretend not to. That the camera has a long appetite and will eat what we give it, and that sometimes we feed it ourselves because it is the only way to keep something from vanishing. I painted catch lights on the eyes of a boy whose people brought him in on a cart under a coverlet today. I held his hand, cold, into his glove. His mother cried without sound. I said I was sorry. I lied again when I made his mouth lighter. Do you see how you have let me guide you into this room until the room feels like yours? That's the last trick. It always was. Lean a little closer. You can still smell the camphor, can't you? Camphor makes you think of winter, of locked trunks and cedar and the way wool holds memory like a sponge. Orris makes you think of violets and ladies' dressing tables with hairpins like small spears. Ether makes you think of hospitals and forgetting. Mercury, hush now. Mercury makes no smell you can name, but the walls remember the men who breathed it and the mirror remembers how slow the rivers flowed over silver. All of it is in the card you are holding. If you release one deep breath, you will fog the surface a little and it will clear again, and you will have done in miniature what I have been doing from the inside for a century, waiting for someone to look long enough to make the gloss wake up. There is movement there if you look long. Not the movement of a living chest, but the movement of understanding like a wave through you. That is what the stage smile is for. It is the hook for your gaze, to reel you in until your feet find the marks on the floor where the clamps once were. Do you remember the first sentence I spoke to you here? I asked you to subscribe because there is a kind of safety that comes from following a thread from picture to picture, from lesson to lesson, from mouth to corrected mouth. It is not a marketplace trick. It is the only way I can bring you with me when the room shivers. There are more pictures in this drawer. There are more mouths. The next one is of a child with a ribbon that keeps lying down where it ought to curl. The next one is of a man whose ear notch is on the other side, and you will see mine at last when the light hits it. You will realize then why I can talk about the collodion's weight when poured, about the wax of albumen under a finger, about the drag marks on a floor that has been swept so many times the boards have rounded like old teeth. You will understand why I could smell orris under the cardstock even before we looked. You will see the headrests bite and the arm clamps smile, and you will stop thinking that the stage part is the crime. The stage part is the courtesy. The crime, if there is one, is that I know how to make you see, and I have used that knowledge to keep you, and now you are kept. When you leave this room, if you leave, you will carry this with you the way a scent clings. You will walk past a shop window at dusk and the north-facing glass will show you, briefly, the person you are when you do not think of yourself. You will see your own mouth in that glass and you will wonder whether someone has drawn it straighter for you because it looks calmer than you feel. You will look again for the tiny meniscus of liquid at the lower lid of your left eye. You will tilt your head to see the notch in your ear and run your finger along it and feel ridiculous and then strangely cold. You will pass a woman in a veil almost black enough to be mistaken for night, and the scent at her collar will make you swallow. She will touch a pendant that might be jet. You will turn your head and forget to move your mouth, and the people who love you will ask if you are all right. You will say you were thinking of something. You will be telling the truth and lying at once. Now one last kindness. Hold the photograph where the light falls clean. Name what you have been taught, softly, so that you remember and so that the names do not become curses. Headrest shadow. Painted catch light. Drawn gum line. Crepe jet hair. Livid ear and purpled nail. Brace mark, doubled edge, corrected sleeve. Albumen gloss. Collodion fog. Mercury's rumor in wood. North light. Orus at the throat. Camphor in the lining. You can feel the room adjusting as you say these, as if something here is pleased to be recognized at last. That is the charm working again. That is the smile doing what it does best. And because I am not a salesman, I am only the voice you found in a picture. I will not order you. I will only say this: if you do not want to look alone next time, subscribe. I will be here when the next smile begins. We will teach each other how to stand, how to sit, how to be held when it is our turn to be arranged. It is easier, I swear, when you know the words for the iron and the dark.